It's that time of the year, the start of a new year, and you are overwhelmed with gym commercials and all the greatest weight loss apps, pre-made food subscriptions, and pills you can take to lose the weight and feel better. You want to live your best life, but what option really works for you?
Are you tired of the high cost of healthcare?
Are you overwhelmed trying to navigate a complicated healthcare system?
Welcome to Get Savvy, Demystifying Healthcare weekly podcast where we take complicated healthcare topics and make them simple.
Imagine if you could stop feeling paralyzed with fear and frustration and instead be empowered to make smart healthcare decisions for you and your family.
Get Savvy with your host, Sandy Kibling, a healthcare professional changing how healthcare knowledge is shared.
Well, hello, everyone. And before we get into the show, I wanted to highlight a few new things for the show for 2026. I am starting my fourth year and could not be happier. The guest I've had on the show and your support over the years has made me so happy and just made me soar. And it just keeps me going to continue this podcast for you. So thank you. So whether or not this is your first time listening to a podcast or viewing, as it were, you've listened for years, make sure you select that follow button so you don't miss an episode. Some new things for 2026. I have switched my recording platform to Riverside so I can also do video, whether that's a short reel or it is the full podcast on my YouTube channel, which I'll link to in the show notes. You can listen and or view if that is your preferred method. Number 2, I have such a great lineup of guests this year, from individuals talking about AI and healthcare, mental health, navigating the healthcare system, sharing their stories about their healthcare experience and providing those pro tips for you. I am so thrilled. I'm actually booked this year already with some amazing guests. So I look forward to sharing that content with you. And finally, just as a reminder, I launched the Savvy Healthcare Lady book series. And the purpose of this is people want healthcare information just in time and when you need it. So that was the purpose of the books. They are very short, concise books on topics like Medicare Decoded, if you're taking care of a senior loved one, or open enrollment in general, demystifying that if you're trying to choose a healthcare plan, or is the doctor really in? Are you seeing the doctor or the PA? I learned a lot writing it about the role of the PA and how they work together with the doctor. So it was super helpful. I'm about to launch the one on prescription meds and how to get those affordably. So you can just look at the Savvy Healthcare Lady on Amazon.com. You can find them there in an e-reader, paperback, or audio format. Honestly, guys, you can get through it on an Uber ride to the airport and be done with it before you get on the plane. They're very short, very bullet pointed with resources that I hope is helpful. So make sure you check that out. And now on with the show. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the show on diet and health. What are the best options? I always talk about navigating our healthcare journey, and in some cases, this is being proactive in finding solutions that help you wherever you are at on your healthcare journey. But with all the hype and food and workout and pill options, what really works and is best for you and your health goals? To help us get into this topic today and then some, I have Beverly Meyer on the show. Beverly is a certified clinical nutritionist in practice since 1985. As a functional health nutritionist, she helps change consumers' futures by helping them lead a more comfortable, happier life with less illness and dysfunction. Welcome to the show, Beverly.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it and maybe start out the question I always start all my podcasts out with, and that is, tell us your story and how it has led you on the journey you are on today.
Yes, it has been a journey. I'm in my 70s, and I started working on my own healthcare in the 1970s. And, I was diagnosed with what has become an extremely common virus, the herpes virus, back in that time. And doctors didn't know much about it then. They don't know much about it now. And I was disappointed that I wasn't able to get clearer information. And that's what started me on my search for, well, who does know something that can help me? And I began working with and visiting and traveling to other doctors, natural health practitioners, complementary medicine practitioners, acupuncturists, whatever, the whole world of other health options just opened up for me, and I loved it. I was running my own companies, my businesses, but my own health was not able to keep up with that. So that was the other motivation, was let's get out here and see who can help me help myself. One of my mottos on my website is help yourself to health. That it's not all in the hands of someone else. We have to be proactive and be wellness warriors and do things on our end that help our doctors and practitioners to understand us better and give us better attention and better advice.
Oh my goodness, music to my ears. You are just, you're in my head, and I love it. I always say this, and that is it's a partnership in health. It's just not the doctor. It is you and the doctor making those decisions and asking questions and all that good stuff. So thank you for reiterating that, because it does take a village these days in our healthcare system. I love how you talked about a wellness warrior. I mean, it sounds almost like this like you're on Survivor or something, you're gonna be a wellness warrior, but what does that mean to the average person, who I mean, is it intimidating? Is it hard? I mean, how do you become that wellness warrior?
I think it's like the pursuit of any other knowledge. It's except that it's this time it's personal, or your spouse or your child or your animal, that it's not just an average course of study that doesn't affect you. This is, you're going to want to be more focused, more inspired, and learn how to use the internet to find professionals that you can learn from and read. And it can be pretty easy to find advice that when you really look at the website, you're like, wait, I know more than this person. And they've got 25 times that they offer to sell me something. Well, you're in the wrong place. Get off. So my site, for example, there's hundreds of website articles and podcasts on there that are all free. And, because they're based on my own health journey, as well as those of clients since the mid 80s. So you want to find people that can speak to what topic you're interested in. And then, yes, look up the traditional medical. What does the Cleveland Clinic say about shingles? Or what does the Mayo Clinic say about pain in the gallbladder? Whatever the issue is, how can you learn to be a better patient? You want to be able to communicate more clearly. These are my symptoms. This is what I'm experiencing. Have some notes here that I brought for you, doctor, some notes about such and such. Do we want to perhaps consider an ultrasound, for example? So the more you know and the more you suggest useful information, the more that practitioner can slow down and look you in the face and say, oh, there's a human being here. They have done their homework and they're asking me a direct question. I think that's a good way to get their attention more usefully. And if you're prepared and they know you're prepared, they're going to respect you as a patient more.
It's so funny. I remember going in, and this one doctor, I thought he was going to fall over because I came in, I was with my sweet mom that my guests often hear about. But I went in with her a nice PDF file of her blood pressure rates over a period of 3 weeks or so. And I mean, it was actually on my phone, and I shared that with him, and he looked at it or whatever. And he was just so grateful because, he said people run in with to the Walgreens to get toilet paper, and they take their blood pressure, and it's likely wrong in how they did it. And they bring in coffee stained Post-it notes, which, I mean, it's a good attempt, but it doesn't really help, help the doctor really get that full view that he or she likely needs to take care of you. Now, speaking of that, let's say that you're going in for that doctor's visit and being proactive, and you go in, and let's say it's that annual wellness check. And of course, that's going to include that lab test, blood panel, whatever it is, and you get the results. And I know this happened to my husband recently, and you get the results and you get some pretty graphs in the patient portal, and you get a few notes from your provider, and you say, oh, I guess that's another year, check that box. But is that really the right approach to take when it comes to lab results?
Well, this is one of the very first things when I start on the phone with a new client.
Mhm.
I've gotten a lot of paperwork from them, some charts, a week's food diary. They make sure they've got some mostly current labs that I help them understand what to order and how to get them and affordably on their own. But I would like to point out to people that look at those lab ranges. For example, look at this item right here. You see the lab range maybe 10 to 100 and you're at 95. What does that tell you? I just turn that back to people and say, what does that tell you? If the range is 10 to 100 and you're at 95, what does that mean? She said, well, the doctor didn't say anything. I said, that's not who I'm asking. I'm asking you. So what I encourage people lifelong is anytime you get a lab is aim for the middle value. Just aim for the middle because most blood work, not all of it, of course, if you're doing a CAT scan or something, there is no middle. That's you. But on a blood test or a salivary hormone test or whatever, these numbers are not just pulled out of the air, except for those on cholesterol. Those are artificially manipulated. That's an industry thing. Some powers that be decided long ago that your cholesterol shall be less than 200 or whatever. But most other labs are based on averages of the people that have blood work done. And if you think about that, that very often is people who are not well. People that are not well are skewing the lab ranges to the high and to the low. That's why I say you want to be you want to be in the middle. That just seems to make sense to me. And then what we're going to do about it, that's a different conversation. But I've empowered people to hopefully to look at the labs and ask their doctor these same questions. Like, I've got several values on here that are right up near the maximum. Sir, what does this mean? Does this not mean these are not quite perfect scores? I mean, they're kind of in the average, but what can I do to do better on these
It's so important that you say that because I do think that people, back to being proactive, will do, and I'm no different. I'm just going to full disclosure, but you're like, ooh, check that off. I'm not over the limit, but talked about being in the middle. You don't want to be so close to the edge. You're like 1 point away from being pre-diabetic, right? That's still not good. So how do you adjust that as well? Now, so I appreciate you bringing that forward, and sometimes it's just those graphs that you get can be often so hard to kind of interpret. So speaking of that, tell us more about what it is that you do. You talked about your clients, you talked about helping them. What do you do for your clients?
Well, as I say, I get a lot of data right off the bat, and I spend a lot of time on my own to try to get a picture in my head of this person. Okay, they're underweight, they're not eating enough, they've checked 3 times on the box about anxiety, their husband's quite ill, whatever. I want to try to, okay, what's driving this person's chemistry? That in clinical nutrition, we're not nutritionists or dietitians. We're more like the chemists of the health world. So when people come to me and say, well, I have insomnia and migraines and TMJ problems, and I don't have a gallbladder, and I get muscle cramps at night, and I'm 50 years old, and do I need hormones? And can I have an hour? I'm like, well, no, it's going to take more time than that because this is the most important thing I do, Sandy, and I've been doing this for decades. I ask people to work for their health. And the biggest first step in that is, let me explain to you how I want you to eat. So what we eat, what we drink, what we smell, what we put on our skin, what we breathe, these are things that affect our chemistry in a big way. Unlike, well, I'll just take 2 vitamin C. That doesn't do anything to affect your whole body chemistry, your brain, your hormones, your muscles, your skin. There's a lot of chemistry going on every second of every day. So the fastest, best way I know is to teach people the correct version of the paleo diet, also known as biological or ancestral or primal. Or I was one of the co-founders of paleo before it had a name. So this is 20 some years
Really?
ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So eat this way for decades. I've been teaching this way for decades. And what I find, and this is so exciting for me, is that if I can get it across to someone, look, the number one rule is the grains have to go. Grains are grass seeds. They're the seeds of grasses. And humans did not eat grass seed. We've been hunters and gatherers for a really long time. The animals that we eat, that we prey on, they're often herbivores. They eat grasses and grass seeds. But us, we're looking for proteins for animals and birds and fish and rabbits and oysters and the proteins, as well as the gathering of nuts and seeds and things. So it's the carbs that get us into trouble, because we do not have carbs in our human history. We never ate pasta and corn and rice and bread and bowls of beans and tortillas and pizzas and and chips and alcohol and all these other things that are just carb, 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 carb. They're very alien to us. And that is why we gain weight. That's like 95% of why we gain weight, is just too much carbs. So great. Let's get back to the diet your body was best adapted to before we came up with agriculture and started raising animals and plants about 12, 13,000 years ago. Let's come back to the diet that we've eaten before then. So more animals, more fats, more vegetables, some tubers, some eggs, and everything else is a condiment. So fruit is a condiment. It's not part of your meal. It's a condiment on your meal, if that makes sense.
It does
And then we have to learn about what makes a good fat and what is an improper fat. And you can get all of that on my website. Takes too much time to explain it here. And thank you for asking.
Oh, no, it does. And oh my God, your wealth of knowledge is just off the charts. Can you maybe provide us, being that you have this massive knowledge here, maybe give us just as like a patient example, a client example of someone who maybe you've helped, kind of where they started and where they ended up as a result of your guidance and counsel?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first person that came to mind was a lovely, gorgeous 35-year-old woman, just beautiful and brilliant. And she'd been diagnosed with this genetic disorder and was having to take very aggressive infusion therapy, where you're sitting in a chair for 8 hours being, stuff in your dripped into your blood. And it was just a nightmare to her. And she heard about me. And I looked at her diet and I said, well, why are you being a vegetarian? What's driving that for you? And she explained, and I noticed on her wrist, she had a little tattoo, and it wasn't in English. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What does your tattoo say? She says, that's kind of, I can't remember the exact words, but she said that's something like a mantra for, veganism. She even had it tattooed on her arm. I said, okay, so here's what I think is going on. And I said, if you're willing to do this, just dive right in and do it. And I laid out the animals and the fats and the cooked vegetables and all of this that I wanted her to do. And she came back in 3 weeks and was literally skipping into the room. She says, this is all gone. All the numbness, the tingling, the weakness in my legs. She said, this is completely gone. And I went to the doctor and they said, oh, we must have made a mistake. You don't have this serious genetic disorder. It literally went away, almost literally overnight, just by getting some decent. And I'm sure she was eating really well, but she was eating not as a human being, because human beings have never been vegans, ever. She was eating as something else. And so there you go. That'll drive up some people's ears when I say that. There's never been a vegan. And here's how I can share that with you a little bit about that. If I say, okay, think of a population or a people or a religious group or someone who is very serious about not killing anything. And people will often say, well, I think the Buddhists are that way, aren't they? They won't kill a fly or a spider. I mean, they're pretty committed. I say, yes, but you know what allows them to live at the high, cold elevations where Buddhist peoples have lived for thousands of years? It's yak butter tea. Yak butter tea. And everyone knows this about the Buddhists. If you're going anywhere near Tibet or Nepal, now India, it's yak butter tea all day long, all night long. They know they would not survive without those saturated fats. And the animal wasn't harmed, but it's the only animal food that they eat, and they require it, and they know it.
Wow, that's really interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that story. So, tell us more about your website. You mentioned it, I believe it's on diet and health. And you also have a podcast, Primal Diet Modern Health. So, tell us a little bit about, well, you mentioned your website earlier, but anything else you'd like to add and tell us about your podcast?
Well, the podcast, Primal Diet, Modern Health. So I wanted to get away from the word paleo. People often don't understand that that refers to the Paleolithic time in
Right.
human history. And I just did a podcast with another host, and as many people do, they asked about paleo. Paleo. I said, no, it's paleo. It's short for Paleolithic. So anyway, I named my podcast Primal Diet, which has the same no grains approach, a little different on some other details, and modern health. So we're looking for the best of modern healthcare, the best of modern healthcare. And that might be someone that's, been doing acupuncture for, the third generation acupuncture, or it might be the young, awesome, smart doctor at the Mayo Clinic. It's the best of modern healthcare. And this is why we as patients need to be as educated as possible, that there are lab tests and there are places to go and there are people to see that can help sort through your chemistry and reorganize it without simply saying, well, here's a pill.
Mhm.
Pills do affect chemistry, but a change in diet, an upgrade in diet and lifestyle can work wonders. And maybe it turns around 2 or 3 of somebody's presenting issues, but then we still need to talk about their bioidentical hormones, or their husband who snores and keeps them awake all night, or they snore with sleep apnea, whatever. Obviously, we have to get to that too. But if they can say, hey, my migraines seem to have stopped, I'm amazed. Well, good. Then we don't need to work with that anymore. They've already handled it just by an upgrade in diet and lifestyle, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, dare I ask you, I'm going to sneak in a question because I know you're an advocate of the primal diet. We'll call it that. But just because I know it's a burning question, I can feel it from my listeners now. Being where you stand and how you promote, do you mind me asking your thoughts on GLP-1 drugs?
Yes, thank you. Okay, everybody knows that, all right, there seem to be terrible side effects on the bad side and terrible side effects on the quote unquote good side, which is potentially rapid weight loss, which, by the way, does leave you with very saggy skin that you're going to have surgically operated on, and, a whole bunch of other things. So what GLP drugs and or supplements do, that mechanism in the human body, it's based on 2 principles: satiety, 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 and physical fullness. Like, yeah, there's food in my tummy. I'm full. I don't need to eat more. So what the GLP drugs do is 2 things. They slow down your digestion, your stomach emptying, the movement through the small intestine, the movement through the large intestine. They just slow everything down in your body. And then your brain says, I have a lot of undigested food in here. I don't want anything to eat right now. So that's kind of a strange thing, and it can lead to literal paralysis of the stomach and this and that. So that's part of why can be such strong side effects, is that you're literally slowing down your whole digestive tract so that your brain says, I just don't think I want to eat. The other thing is the satiety, the feeling of not fullness, but a feeling of, I'm satisfied. I can go a couple hours right now and do my thing, and I've had my meal and I'm cool. Well, that is in large part provided by the protein, of course, the animal protein, but especially the fats in our diet. Too many overweight people, as well as too many underweight people, we're so frightened of fats in this culture that we don't understand good fats from bad fats and how to gauge them, what to eat, and why it's so urgent to avoid canola oil, and corn oil and soybean oil, which are in pretty much all restaurant and packaged foods. But any fat will lend a bit of satiety, but the GLP drugs address that hormone and transmitter directly by just basically telling it, I feel full, I feel satisfied, I feel full, I feel satisfied. And the fullness is by slowing down digestion, the other is satisfaction. But when you turn the diet around, get off the carbs, which we digest very quickly, right?
Mhm.
Like sugar and a cinnamon roll and, alcohol, these kind of carbs, obviously they digest, quote unquote, digest very quickly. But, a hamburger patty and a big pile of steamed vegetables and some butter and olive oil and everything and a little bit of a sweet potato on there, the satisfaction and satiety are there naturally. And
Mm.
one of the things about the paleo diet, whether it's called primal, ancestral, biological, my own diet on my website, the Diet for Human Beings, which I filmed years ago, um, that's how we're meant to eat. And we don't need to trick our body with drugs. And one of the side effects of going really strongly into paleo and understanding it is that people lose weight. And this has always been true, and I'm a very slim person, have always been a little bit underweight, so I have to watch how I eat paleo so that I don't lose weight. But most people do lose weight on paleo. It's just the body doesn't need to store all those carbohydrates anymore. It's just not the way we're designed.
Wow. This has been so interesting. I appreciate your grace and allowing me kind of to go that way. It came to me, and I'm sure my listeners appreciated that as well. Well, I know we're getting close to our time, but I want to make sure that we will link to your fabulous website on diet and health, and also to your podcast, Primal Diet and Modern Health. You've got some great episodes on there, and just to hear more, because like you said earlier, it's a lot to get to. But I always like to leave the final tips and closing thoughts to you, Beverly, what you'd like to leave my listeners with today.
Be prepared, do your homework, be committed to yourself. There's no white knight going to ride in and magically change your body and your discomforts and your issues well, that's not true. The people, doctors and practitioners can change what's going on, but you want to be as aware as you can be and educated as you can be, and run your own labs when you can. Lifeextension.com is a terrific resource. Send all my clients there if they don't have current blood work, because it's affordable. It's outside of the insurance system. You don't have to wait. And there are other what we call consumer labs that are all over the country, except 5 states up in the Northeast. They don't allow consumer labs. So much for them. But the rest of us can go and order blood work on our own. And as an example, maybe you really want to test your thyroid labs and your doctor won't run them for you. They run a basic TSH and they say, oh, your thyroid's fine. See you in a year. And like, well, no, wait a minute. I'd really like to know. So you can go to my website, look up an article on how to test your thyroid, and which also includes how to interpret those numbers, your lab ranges, and you can go and order it on Life Extension and run it yourself. So, that's a great resource. The more prepared you are. And there's 2 websites that I like people to use to study. One, of course, is my own. The other is a practitioner named Chris Kresser. That's Chris with a C, Kresser with a K. He is extremely knowledgeable and can be a little over your head sometimes because he is so smart, but he has incredible guests and everything's transcribed so you can read it or listen to it. And you can just go to his site and search maybe, has he talked about GLP-1 drugs? Has he talked about gallbladder problems? Has he talked about elevated LDL particle numbers in your cholesterol? And you're going to You're going to learn something from both of us, and you don't need to skip around to random people that you don't know. So that's my best advice.
Wonderful. Well, I am just blown away by your knowledge and just even talking to you more and just the things that you shared. I appreciate about the labs and so many people. I'm also a health insurance broker. And so many people, due to the affordability, can't always afford insurance. So it's nice to know to be able to have those options. So, assuming they can get to that, you mentioned life extensions, they can get to those from your website if they want to test their own get their own lab work done, that's correct, I believe?
Well, I have nothing to do with life extension, so I mention it on my website if
Okay.
I'm writing something about, how to test these, whatever, your thyroid, for example, and the hormones I test with salivary testing, salivary testing. So I write and talk a lot about salivary testing for hormones. It's completely different than blood testing,
Okay.
but that's different. The blood work, that's something that, yeah, go to lifeextension.com, and they're going to have a good price on things, and they make their money by selling supplements for people that run labs. If you want their advice, you get a blood test back, and you get a free consult, and they say, well, such and such, you might want to consider these enzymes and this iron or this and that and the other. That's how they make their money. That's why their blood work is more of a loss leader, if you will. But the labs are LabCorp and Quest and so on. I mean, they're normal.
Well, it's good to know. I always like to provide people options out there. Like I said, I always say on the show, I mean, I don't know where anyone's at on their healthcare journey, but your enlightenment today and your time has been amazing. So thank you so much for your time. And again, we'll link to your website, and so everybody has knows where to find you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed having Beverly on the show. Her wealth of knowledge is amazing. So make sure you check out her website to review the resources available to you. Also, check out Beverly's podcast, Primal Diet, Modern Health. In our next episode, I have Dr. Fred Moss on the show. Known to many as the Undoctor, Dr. Moss does not reject medicine. He widens the conversation. Dr. Moss is a psychiatrist, healer, speaker, and restorative coach who has spent over 4 decades working inside nearly every corner of modern psychiatry, and then chose to ask a deeper question: what actually heals human beings? Until next time, get savvy.